Okay, here is a potentially controversial idea. The internet has blown out of proportions the health benefits of sourdough. And it wouldn't be the first time that we have seen something like this. There have been so many things that the internet has hyped up only for us to later realize that the truth is actually a lot less exciting. So in this video, I'm going to unpack all of this and what I think the actual health benefits of sourdough are. But before I do, I want to fully acknowledge that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a nutritionist, dietitian, whatever have you, no official education in this area. But what I do have is, I think, a lot of common sense, and I'm able to think critically about topics that people talk about. And I have looked into some official studies that look into the health benefits of sourdough. So I feel like I do have an idea around this that's not completely crazy, but I would definitely encourage you to apply your own critical thinking and common sense when you hear my ideas. When you look up the health benefits of sourdough online, and whether that's sourdough bread or whatever other sourdough product, you usually come across three things: that it is more digestible, that there are more nutrients that our body is able to absorb, and that it is better because it keeps you full for longer since it doesn't spike your blood sugar as much. Now, from what I have read and seen and heard and researched, all of these three benefits come from the fact that sourdough is fermented for a long period of time. And that long fermentation is what I want to talk about, and where I feel like a lot of the misinformation or over-exaggeration comes from. First of all, what even is long fermentation? I have never come across any of the people that talk about the health benefits or any of the studies to actually define what long fermentation is. Is it 2 hours? Is it 4, 6, 8, 24, 72? I don't know. I haven't come across any specific information. Neither do I expect to, because I feel like this is a scale, right? It's not like you ferment the bread for 4 hours and there are zero benefits, zero, positive processes happening in the bread. And then all of a sudden at 4 hours and 10 minutes, you have all of the benefits, right? It's like you do a short fermentation or like a quick rise of the bread, maybe not as healthy. And then as you extend the fermentation, the health benefits also extend. Essentially, the bacteria that's in your starter has a better chance to ferment the flour that you're adding to it and doing all of the processes that it's supposed to do that make it more healthy. I'm not going to go into those individual processes and how it actually works, because even though I've listened and I've read and I've studied this, I don't feel like I have the capacity to repeat the information accurately. So if you want to know how it exactly works, how the fermentation works, what happens with all of the different biological components of the bread and flour and everything, feel free to do your own research. But these are the conclusions, the overall practical conclusions I came to afterwards. And so the length of fermentation is the first big variable in this. And there are, of course, others as well, like the type of flour that you use to make your bread or whatever other products. Your own starter, like every starter is a little bit different. The bacteria that's in it, the yeast that's in it is a little bit different, even though it tends to do the same thing. Again, from what I understand, if you take two starters from two different people, they're not going to be identical, and therefore the result and the health benefits of the two different breads are also not going to be identical. And this is something I often think about when I see these recipes or these tutorials for quick sourdough breads or quick sourdough pancakes or whatever, when in the recipe you add more leavening agents like dry yeast or baking powders to it, or you just add the starter to your pancake batter 15 minutes before you make the pancakes. And I feel like that means because the fermentation then is so short, there isn't really all that much difference in terms of the health benefits if you were to completely remove the starter and just use your baking powder or yeast or whatever have you. At least, again, that is my opinion, me applying my common sense. I haven't done any scientific research into this, any scientific experiments. This is not a lab, it's a kitchen. And so, but I also feel like nobody else has done that. It's not like there are scientists all over the world exploring and making very precise measurements on, how healthy sourdough pancakes are. So my first takeaway is the fermentation time is really what makes sourdough bread more healthy. And the longer you ferment, the healthier it is. I would say to probably a point like you don't want your sourdough to be too sour, or you still want to stick to whatever you think tastes good, right? Which for me, usually I'm somewhere around the 15 to 24 hours overall fermentation. I do a couple hours on the counter, and then I do a couple more hours in the fridge, usually until the next day. So I end up somewhere in that range, which from what I have seen, I would think is, again, more on the spectrum of this is more healthier than the 2-hour fermentation or whatever short fermentation you can do. So the one issue is these quick fermentation sourdough products. And another one that I think about is when you're buying sourdough products from someone else. You haven't done them yourself, because then you have no idea how exactly that bread was made. Or at least here in the Czech Republic, where I live, we don't have any regulations as to what can be called sourdough. So I'm pretty sure that even if they, at the bakery, they just add a scoop of sourdough starter and then use a ton of commercial yeast or baking powder or whatever else and do a 1-hour fermentation or something, they're still going to call that product sourdough bread in the end, even though it has none of the, or not none, but very little of the health benefits compared to just a regular bread. And I would be surprised. You let me know in the comments if you live in other countries and you're aware of any regulations or laws around the, this naming, like what can be called sourdough in your country. Because I would, guess that most countries don't have any such regulations around it. So you don't really know unless you go and ask, which of course you're, more than welcome and encouraged to do, how exactly does the bakery prepare this sourdough bread? And then you can judge, is this really likely to be more healthy than the regular bread that doesn't use sourdough starter in the process? And then the last point I want to talk about is how much healthier is sourdough compared to other breads. And again, you have this huge issue that you're comparing two things like sourdough bread and regular bread, where neither of these is clearly defined. Like if I do comparison of my sourdough bread versus a bread that I bought at a local bakery here, I'm doing a completely different comparison than maybe your sourdough bread compared to your bread at your local bakery. Like those are all very different products. And so it is really hard to say how much healthier, like what is the difference? Because like there are so many variables in the process. And so you can have two breads, one sourdough, one not sourdough, and still have them be very close to each other in the health benefits, because even when it's not sourdough, it can still be fermented for a long period of time, even using like standard commercial yeast or baking powders and so on. And then you can also have a massive difference if you compare, long fermented sourdough starter with like the most commercially produced maybe sandwich type loaf of bread that you can imagine. Like those are going to be on the complete opposite ends of the scale, right? So I think this is always important to consider when you're thinking about switching to sourdough. Like, what are you switching from? And, then judging, well, how much do I think? And I know like this is difficult or weird because it's just so like we really don't know, and I think that's something that we just have to be at peace with. And that is also the reason why I wouldn't put sourdough on this pedestal that it has been sitting on for the last couple of years. I just don't think it belongs there. So my personal conclusions: am I going to stop making sourdough bread? Of course not. I love making it. I love the taste of it. It's one of the best breads that I've eaten, but I'm definitely not going to make it thinking that it's this absolutely amazing food that is, uncomparable to anything else I can get at the store or at a bakery, because I feel like it's not. I could definitely get a very good choice at the store as well. So I still think that sourdough bread is healthier than non-sourdough bread or non-sourdough products, but I'm just not going to stress over it too much. I don't think that it is this magical, super healthy food that I absolutely need to eat and I absolutely need to make just because it's healthy. I first and foremost want to make it because it tastes good and I enjoy it. That's my number one reason. Yes, I do think it's healthier, but that's only like a bonus added on top of that. And I just consider sourdough bread a part of a bigger, food lifestyle kind of choices. And I've talked about this a little bit in my healthy food philosophy as well. I don't focus on any individual ingredients, any individual foods, but rather on the bigger picture. Do I eat mostly food that is mostly healthy? Well, then I'm on the right track. Even if there are sometimes things that are not as great, or sometimes I will buy sandwich bread, even though I haven't done that in probably since I started making sourdough bread. But I'll buy other things that are other breads that are maybe not sourdough, or they're called sourdough in the store, but I don't really trust them in that regard. But that bread is delicious, so I'll still want to eat it, want to buy it. But most of the time I am consuming my own sourdough bread. And this is another point that I wanted to make in terms of how healthy it is and what kind of an impact it will have on you. Very much depends on how much bread do you actually eat, or how much of these sourdough products do you consume. I eat bread pretty much almost every single day, and so to me it makes sense that I choose the variant that is maybe even just slightly healthier, because I know that in the large amounts that I consume it in, it's going to have more of an impact than if I ate bread just once a month or something. And when I looked at some of these studies, the issue they had was it was very, very difficult for them to separate the effects of sourdough bread versus everything else the people in these studies were eating, right? Like they didn't have people put on the exact same diet, eating these exact same foods for an extended, period of time. Like this would be a massive effort to go through to really find out what the exact results of that were. So if people just eat different things, the fact that they eat sourdough bread gets kind of diminished by everything else, or it just gets diluted in the rest of their diet. And so the scientists have a pretty tough time separating the effects of sourdough versus everything else, and even not just what people eat. We all know that there are other things that have a massive influence on our health. Things like sleep, our stress levels, our activity, all of these things have an effect on us. And so whether you eat sourdough bread or some other type of bread is just a teeny tiny bit of your overall health. And so I hope that with this video, or at least that was my intention, is to maybe alleviate some of the pressure if you're feeling pressured that you have to make sourdough bread because it's this super healthy food that you absolutely need to eat. It's not that amazing. It's not like if you eat sourdough bread, you can just eat crappy food for the rest of the day and you will be in this amazing, you will have this amazing health. That's just not how it works, in my opinion. And again, I don't think I'm totally crazy for thinking that. So yes, again, I do believe it is healthier, but we don't have to go that crazy on it. So let me know your own thoughts down in the comments. I look forward to the conversation and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.